In the beautiful city of Samara, located in Russia where the Volga and Samara rivers meet, a girl named Anastasija Sokolova grew up. Samara is one of the oldest and most vibrant cities in Russia, with wide boulevards, historic buildings, and the endless silver ribbon of the Volga embracing the city like a gift from nature. In summer, the air smells of fresh grass and river breeze. In winter, heavy snow covers the roofs, and people hurry through the frosty streets wrapped in warm coats. Anastasija, called Nastya by everyone, was different from the other girls. While her friends dreamed of pretty dresses and a good marriage, little Nastya had one big dream. She wanted to go to Germany. Already at 12 years old, she glued pictures of German castles, the Rhine River, and the green hills of Bavaria into her school notebook. She didn't exactly know why, but something in her heart kept saying, "Something is waiting for you there." Because she believed so strongly, she started learning German. In the 1990s in Samara, that wasn't easy. No good language courses, no internet, only an old, worn-out textbook her aunt had given her. She memorized vocabulary, listened to German songs on the radio when she could catch them, and spoke quietly to herself when no one was listening. Her pronunciation was rough, her grammar uncertain, but Nastya never gave up. At 24 years old, everything changed. At an event in Samara, she met a German man with Russian roots, Alexander Meyer. He was charming, spoke fluent Russian, and looked at her as if she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Nastya truly had that classic Russian beauty. High cheekbones, big expressive eyes, long dark lashes, and long wavy hair that shimmered like dark gold. Alexander was immediately smitten. He wanted to take her to Germany, marry her, and give her a new life. Nastya's parents weren't thrilled. "He's German," they said. "You barely know him. What if he only wants you because you're so beautiful?" But Nastya was in love and convinced this was the path God had prepared for her. She was a deeply believing woman, not attending the big Orthodox church, but a small evangelical congregation that had existed underground even in Soviet times when Christians were heavily persecuted. There she had learned that God speaks personally to each person and has plans far greater than our own. Finally, her parents gave their blessing. Nastya and Alexander married in Samara, and just a few months later, she flew with him to Germany. At first, they lived in Hanover, in Germany. The city was big, clean, and orderly, so different from Samara. Nastya was happy. At the beginning, her husband even went to church with her, just like he had in Russia. But after 2 or 3 years, things began to change. Alexander became less and less interested in her. The initial passion cooled down. He no longer praised her beauty, hardly hugged her anymore. Instead, he came home later, watched a lot of TV, and spoke little with her. Deep in her heart, Nastya felt that he had mainly wanted her for her looks. The beautiful Russian woman, that was like a trophy for him. The real Nastya, her dreams, her deep faith, her longing for closeness to God, that no longer seemed to interest him. Later, they moved to Würzburg in Germany because Alexander's parents lived there. In Würzburg, they bought a beautiful single-family house with a garden. It was their shared home, where Nastya had dreamed of building a nest for her family. Here she gave birth to their 2 daughters, first Darya, 4 years later Sophia. The girls were her greatest pride. Darya had inherited her mother's dark hair, Sophia her father's lighter eyes. Nastya loved singing Russian songs with them and telling them stories from Samara. But the older the children grew, the clearer it became to Nastya that she was living in an invisible prison. Her husband strictly forbade her from taking a job. "You stay home with the children," he said. She was allowed to go shopping, take the girls to school, but that was it. When she once suggested taking a German course to improve her language, he just laughed mockingly. "You don't need that. You have me." The years passed. Nastya was almost always at home. She cooked, cleaned, took care of the children, and waited. Waited for affection, for conversation, for a bit of life. But nothing came. When Daria was 13 and Sofia 9, Nastya made a heavy decision. She filed for divorce. It wasn't easy. Alexander fought back, argued and manipulated skillfully. In the end, Nastya was left with almost nothing. The beautiful family house, which they had bought together and where she had raised her children, he managed to keep entirely through legal tricks and clever arrangements. Nastya received nothing, no share, no financial compensation. Instead, he had piled up debts in her name through further tricks, which she now had to bear alone. The divorce was final, but the financial and emotional different time. Nastya listened. The next morning, she sat at the kitchen table, opened her old Russian Bible, and began to speak the words out loud that she had once loved so much. "I am healed by his stripes. I am strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. God supplies all my needs according to his riches in glory. I am no longer under the curse, but under the blessing. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." At first, it felt strange. Her voice was quiet and uncertain, but she continued. Every morning, every evening, sometimes even in the middle of the day when darkness tried to overwhelm her, she proclaimed God's word over her health, over her finances, over her daughters, and over her future. Slowly, very slowly, something happened. The deep sadness lifted. The physical weakness decreased. She slept better, and most importantly, hope returned to her heart. A living, radiant hope she hadn't felt in many years. The financial problems were still there. The old debts and the loss of the house weighed heavily. But Nastya was no longer desperate. She smiled again. She sang with her daughters again. She had a vision for the future again. The girls grew up. When Sofia celebrated her 18th birthday, Nastya knew, it is time. She didn't want to grow old alone in Germany. She longed for Samara, for the Volga, for the language of her childhood, for the small congregation where she had felt God so close. She began to prepare everything. She sold the last pieces of furniture, gave away clothes she no longer needed, cleared away mountains of bulky waste. Little by little, her household shrank to 2 large suitcases, exactly what she was allowed to take on the flight. Only a few pots, some dishes, and her Bible remained. Then the miracle happened. Without Nastya asking anyone for money, several people from her church community, and even 2 strangers who had heard her story, came together and paid all her debts, the entire amount, just like that. "God put it on our hearts," they simply said. Nastya stood crying in her almost empty apartment and could hardly believe it. She was free, really free. The house was lost, the years in Germany had left deep marks, but her soul was healed again. Today, Nastya is once more the woman she used to be, only even more radiant. The gloom is gone. Instead, she radiates a deep, quiet joy. She has already inquired about job opportunities in Samara, maybe in a cafe, maybe in church social work. She doesn't know exactly yet, but she knows that God has a way for her. All preparations are made. The suitcases are packed in the hallway. The ticket is booked. She is only waiting for the day of departure. Nastya looks out the window of her apartment in Würzburg, sees the Franconian hills, and smiles softly. "From Samara I came," she whispers. To Germany I went, and to Samara I return, richer than ever before. Not in money or houses, but in faith, in hope, and in the certainty that God never abandons his children. And somewhere in the distance, she already hears the rushing of the Volga. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching this story with me until the end. In a world that often feels cold and noisy, stories like this, profound, heartfelt, and full of faith, are so important. If you'd like more of these, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new one. Let me know in the comments how this story touched you. I really read every single comment. May God bless you with a wonderful day. See you soon.